So good morning, everybody. My name is Danijel Benjamin Ćubelić. I'm the head of the anti-discrimination LGBTIQ program of the city of Heidelberg. At the same time, I'm head of the office of the European Coalition of Cities Against Racism. And I'm very happy that I'm the opportunity to discuss today the second panel of this conference. Will have the focus on isolation, trauma, and violence. Before we start, just a few reminders. The panel will feature a discussion of about 40 minutes and will be followed by a 20-minute Q&A session. You will be able to submit questions anonymously via the Zoom webinar's chat function throughout the webinar. Please be aware that due to the high volume of attendees, and we might not, unfortunately, not be able to answer all the questions. Please note also that we won't be able to answer case-specific questions. So if you need counseling, if you have any question regarding your own personal case, please visit the Queer European Asylum website under www.queereuropeanasylum.org, where you find some useful links, where you can get in touch to some of the experts here in the panel, but also to other experts working on these issues all over Germany and in Europe. And please follow us also on Twitter under the hashtag Queer Euro Asylum, and tweet about the symposium. You find our Twitter account under Queer Euro Asylum, and the hashtag is COVID-19 Queer Asylum. This symposium is also live streamed on the Queer European Asylum Facebook page. And finally, I'd like to mention that each panel of this symposium has its own Zoom link, which you find in the message sent to you via Eventbrite. So when this panel here ends at about 12:30, we will have a 1-hour lunch break. And then at 1:30, we will start. You have to click on the next Zoom link for the next panel. But let's, because we don't have that much time, let's go directly in our discussion. As first reports from anti-violence projects all over Europe and in Germany have shown that gender-based violence in general in Germany and in Europe is on the rise in the last weeks during the COVID-19 crisis. At the same time, the coronavirus, of course, increases the stress, fear, and also the economic pressures many refugees are faced with, especially in camps and shared housing units. This can lead to even more stress, and then maybe violence with vulnerable, such as LGBTIQ plus refugees and asylum seekers. For them, staying at home in such places means being trapped in an unsafe environment. The mandatory lockdown, which of course means to protect us all from the virus, has for LGBTIQ refugees serious repercussions. It is separating them from the people and infrastructure that could offer counseling. And without having access also to proper Wi-Fi, for example, in a refugee shelter, social distancing means very often social isolation, being cut off from your friends, from your networks in the community, also from counseling institutions. So we want to discuss the effects of the crisis on the daily life and mental health of LGBTIQ refugees and asylum seekers. And I'm very glad that I have already set a panel of experts who are all working in the field. I will introduce you all. First, Lilith is a trans woman with migration background. She's working for the rights of LGBTIQ refugees and asylum seekers in Germany since 2015, and is since 2017 working for a German-wide project of the LSVD, the gay and lesbian organization in Germany called Queer Refugees Germany. The aim of the new, since 2 years, new LSVD project is to network structures existing counseling LGBTIQ refugees and asylum seekers throughout Germany, to bring them together and also connect LGBTIQ activists and support them in their work. Rzouga Selmi is a Tunisian refugee LGBTIQ activist. They were a former office member of the first Tunisian queer organization, Damsch, before coming to Germany. Since fleeing to Germany in 2017, Rzouga is active in Plus, Rhein-Neckar, organizing a queer refugee group, coordinating a queer refugee network here in the Rhein-Neckar region in the city of Hoffenheim, Heidelberg, Ludwigshafen. Rzouga is also a drag performer using their platform for raising awareness about queer refugee rights in the Middle East and North Africa, and of course in Europe. Julia Serdarov has an MA in political sciences. She's an activist in anti-racist and queer feminist movements. Has collected a lot of experience working for the Bavarian Refugee Council, for several anti-violence projects and programs, and now working for LeTRa. She will tell you later more about the work of LeTRa during the discussion. She is also involved in refugee counseling, in press work and campaigns and lobby work. And last but not least, Ibrahim Willeke, a gay activist from Lebanon, who had to flee his home country because he faced severe violence from his family, and lives in Germany since 2015, is already active also since 2016, founded the first LGBTIQ refugee network called SOFRA Cologne. You also see it here, the logo. And also documenting, now working for as a coordinator of the Anti-Violence Office for LGBTIQ in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany since 2019 for Rubicon in Cologne. Ibrahim Willeke fights for the visibility and rights of LGBTIQ refugees in Germany. I want to welcome you all, and I want to start with the first question. Maybe on the what kind of experiences you are confronted with at the moment, maybe starting you, Lilith, because you're coordinating all this LGBTIQ counseling institutions in Germany. What cases were brought to you, to your office, and what are LGBTIQ refugees and asylum seekers experienced during the Corona crisis? What is reported?
Thank you, Daniel. So as you said that I'm working for the Queer Refugees Deutschland project, which means that we are connecting almost all of the organizations working within Germany for the queer refugees and asylum seekers. The first problem that we had right after the lockdown was that nobody was writing us anymore, at least for 1 week, because everybody was panicked and they didn't know what to do and what is going on. And after the first week, we started to have a lot of reports about violence, reports about being abused, reports about being robbed of their belongings, and then also reports about being discriminated within the camps because most of the social workers were not there. So all of a sudden, like, we were not expecting that everybody would go through a lot of trauma than before, because people were already going through trauma. The asylum centers are not a place for people who have already gone through traumatization or gone through discrimination, or have lived lives with a lot of difficulties with their families or with their fellow country people. And then this has now gone to other extremes, because you have just security members there in the asylum centers, or maybe one or two people who are the topmost authorities from the BUMP who are working there. Other than that, everybody is doing home office. And home office means online counseling. And online counseling means there are no Wi-Fi connections, there is no internet in your asylum center where you are being placed. And the only thing that you can do is you use your internet data through your mobile company, which, if you do not have a contract, is extremely expensive. Germany is one of those countries in Europe where data is like you get 1 GB for like 10 euros. There are certain kind of companies who do that. And people who are asylum seekers or who are refugees and living in refugee centers, they cannot afford that. That is way too much. And then most of the authorities who are funding all these projects, or the projects that are working all over the Germany, the authorities started to expect from people that they all should start an online counseling for refugees. The problem is how? How should we do that? The only medium is WhatsApp. We have a WhatsApp number, and the number of refugees and asylum seekers who are LGBTI people approaching us has gone double within Europe now. Like people are literally asking, where should I go? Where is the place to go? Because you need to have a place, and counseling is done in an environment where you feel safe and not in a refugee center. A refugee center is not safe for you to talk about your experiences as an LGBTI person. It can trigger violence even more than already is. So these are the problems that we are facing at the moment. And I think later Ibrahim, he can also tell you more about what kind of violence within NRA is happening. And maybe there are other people who are approaching Ibrahim outside of NRA as well. That's very, very possible, because I'm also now counseling a couple of trans women and trans men from South Asia, because I can speak their languages, and they are really traumatized. They want to go back to the normal life, at least what kind of normal life they had. They want to have that. Thank you.
Thank you. You already mentioned Ibrahim's work, and maybe we can directly over to you, Ibrahim. Maybe you can explore a little bit, what was the situation, the violence LGBTIQ refugees were facing already before the crisis? Mm-hmm. And what, do you already have a first impression if something is changing at the moment, just from your daily work?
Before I start, I just want to correct two small info happened at the beginning. I started working 2017, and I'm responsible for documenting cases of violence against LGBTIQ refugees. I'm not the coordinator. My colleague Shafika Gomez is the coordinator of the anti-violence office. Okay, so to go back to your question, I want to refer to that lockdown and isolation is not something new that LGBTIQ refugees are experiencing now. Since ever, LGBTIQ refugees are victims of violence and targeted violence. So what they are experiencing now, especially in this new regulations of Corona, restriction of movement or stay at home, it puts them in hostile environment with an abusive, for example, an abusive roommate or an homophobic roommate or an abusive partner and an unsupported family member. And these things could affect their mental and physical health by triggering some history of their trauma. Mm-hmm.
What does this mean exactly, re-triggering? Can you explore this a little bit further, maybe?
Mm-hmm. A lot of LGBTIQ refugees have a history of trauma, which shows symptoms of fear, symptoms of anger, symptoms of nightmares, symptoms of irritability. All these things with a long time period in a hostile confinement and hostile environment with this abusive partners or roommates could re-trigger this trauma by, so for example, also this re-triggered trauma could affect on their behavioral in a risky way. For example, it could lead for abuse in food obsession or abuse in alcohol, abuse in drinking, or abuse in substance. And these risky behaviors could affect on their physical health. For example, this risky behavior could lead to chronic diseases, to diabetes, to heart attacks, and in worst scenario cases, these symptoms could lead to self-harm and suicide.
Do you also have maybe a profile of the attackers, the ones who are attacking LGBTIQ refugees in the camp and housing.
Mm-hmm.
We have like an experience, is this happening in phases of stress, if there are conflicts, are there ways to solve this kind of violence cultures inside? What can you do against it in the camp?
So far, I cannot now precisely speak about specific cases of violence caused and happened in the pandemic, because most of the LGBT refugees still don't have an access to the support structure to report such cases. For that, for example, 2 days ago, we created the first video material about reporting violence, and this video material, we informed LGBTIQ refugees how to reach us, how could this pandemic affect on them, and also why it's important to reach of us and how we can support them in such cases. I can't hear you.
Yes. Thank you. We heard now a lot about the situation already in the camps. You, Julia, are working directly also in the camps, and your organization, LeTRa, gave out a press release that actually the major refugee camps should be closed. Can you explain why your organization is demanding the closure of these camps? What is the situation in the camps, and what is the problem of safe housing? What would be proper housing?
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe first of all, like we're not really working in the camps. So LeTRa is a lesbian queer counseling organization, and yeah, many lesbian queer refugees seek counseling at our organization, but also many trans refugees actually. And through like, these contacts with our clients, we got to know about many things, what is happening in the camps. And so after the whole Corona crisis, so-called Corona crisis started, yeah, we realized that somehow like pre-existing very much intensified. I mean, it was already mentioned before. I'm maybe repeating myself, but I think you know that people in camps, they all live on very limited space. All of them share rooms with many other people. Like having a single room is a very rare thing, right? And then especially like women, especially LGBTIQ refugees, they face a lot of violence, discrimination, hatred in these camps because, of course, like they are staying with people they haven't chosen to stay. And of course, like many of these people, they spread hatred and violence, of course. So somehow, like all of these problems already existed before the so-called Corona crisis. But then, like the situation just tightened. The situation just worsened, we can say. And yeah, and I mean, speaking of Bavaria, like our organization is based in Munich, and I think you all know Bavaria is in Germany always some kind of a very special case. And we all speak a lot about the Anchor centers here, like these huge centers, and it's also good. But then even if the Anchor centers will be closed, there is still the whole system of camps. And I guess a camp is not a good place to stay for anybody, but then especially like for people, for LGBTIQ people, it's definitely not a safe place. It was not before the Corona crisis, and now it is not, as people are like really locked there with somehow their abusers. I just saw the question, like the name of the organization is LeTRa, LeTRa. Yeah, you can find us on Facebook and online, of course. And so I think it was mentioned also in the panel before by Anbit that even before LGBTIQ refugees used somehow as a social distancing. And I guess this is also something we could see from our counseling work, is that isolation, even like in the camps, was before like a survival strategy. Like people would try not to be in too close contact with their roommates, with the people in general in their camps. so that they wouldn't know too much about where like what they are, what is their community. And so this social life outside of the camp was really crucial for so many people. Also, by the way, regarding trauma, like having like a day structure with like going to German class, maybe having a small job, and then of course the community events. The LGBTIQ community events are so crucial for like for all LGBTIQ refugees, and as most of them are traumatized, it's so important to have this day structure and to have this life outside of the camps. And all of this is not happening now, right? I mean, yeah, like for so many German citizens who are under lockdown now, they can, as it was also mentioned before, like they can just yeah, like go to online conferences and be in home office. And as the Wi-Fi in the camps, this is also like our experience is so bad that like maybe WhatsApp is working, but everything for which you need more data is like it's much it's not just not possible. Yeah, so maybe I stop here. Or maybe just one last point, also speaking like maybe of the perspective, because people also of course stayed in this condition before, but before people had hope that they could move very soon. So you can write this application for transfer, and then you wait for a while, and then if you're lucky you can maybe move to a women's camp if you're like a lesbian refugee, or like you move maybe to a smaller camp, or at least you move to Munich if you stayed in a remote area before. But now with the corona crisis, the government stopped all of the transfers. So at the moment, like there's like people are really lacking this perspective of getting out of this housing situation. Yeah, thank you.
We heard now a lot about the camps, but we have also, when we look into the daily life, not of asylum seekers, but already of accepted refugees, the corona crisis has also severe repercussions. And Julia already mentions how the daily life, the rhythm is changing or maybe even breaking down. And that's why I wanted to ask you, Rzouga, I mean, many refugees organized in the queer refugee group of Plus Rhein-Neckar are also facing these kind of obstacles, losing jobs, losing their lease structure. Can you explore what repercussions the crisis has, maybe for people not in the asylum centers anymore, but are already accepted refugees, but are still needing community help and also interactions with friends, with other networks?
It's a very interesting point to discuss, because when we usually speak about refugees, we always handle the cases of the people who are still applying and still in the process of the refugee mainly. Otherwise, there is a big problem with the people who, as Julia said, people who just moved in and people who are willing to move in soon, people who just got jobs after a lot of search and after a lot of problems to get in a job that they fit in with their language skills and with their daily life-to-life skills. We have people who just moved in like 2 months ago and now they don't have any financial abilities to pay their rent anymore, like the way they should be. I mean, of course, they are arranging something with the government and it's pandemic and it's crisis, but people should take in consideration the mental efforts and the mental energy that people put in to find a place. So the chances are being moved out again out of that place and relocating is very mentally exhausting and stressing, especially when people face a lot of racism and go through a lot of discrimination in the rent market and the housing market in the city, as crowded as Heidelberg and other cities right here. Also, we have people who their jobs don't really require language skills, so they put it that as a second priority or a third priority and focused on just like working and earning money to be dependent. Now they are not able to find any job anywhere else. Well, they do not really communicate in German, like things like kitchen or cleaning and those kind of like daily hand works. So it's very complicated for these those community, these kind of persons, for jobs. And we never mainly talk about people who in what I call transitional integration phase. It's meaning the people who just finished something, such as in my personal case, my language course, and I was waiting for another language course. So it was practically for me already 2 months self-isolated, quarantined at my place. And then like 2 weeks before starting the school that I registered for, we have social isolation. And then now I'm laid back, but it was at first very stressing. There's another point that I want to talk about when it comes to trauma and things that being triggered. We have a lot of people who came from communities and countries where they had wars. It's feeling very much similar to them. It's the same concept, like of avoiding death and saving your life. It's only, I literally had a friend who told me it's not very much different. In our country, we see missiles and guns, we just like turn and leave, but now what we are running from, we practically don't see at all. So it's like in a war situation, we see guns and we see the missiles and we leave, we run. Now we are running like crazy people in our places, in our homes. For me personally, it's also a bit, I wouldn't say it's traumatizing, but it's a bit stressing, the speed of which the news at the first start and the panic state that we went through reminded me somehow of our revolution in my home country, in Tunisia, and the curfew and the lockdown and the military and the police of it. It was a lot of news speeches and governmental orders and all of that. So it was a bit stressing, a bit, I was very much confused at first. I shut it down completely. I didn't function anymore. Now I'm in a better place. I'm taking my walks, I'm writing my thoughts and all of that. And I'm washing my hands, and I'm having it as my normal life. Now I'm getting used to it. Otherwise, also we need to talk about people who were already suffering from depression and stress, and then it went totally also shut down. I can also express my opinion about people who don't have any access to anything anymore. For example, for the Unicorn refugee group that I'm volunteering for, my main 2 points is to take the refugee group of like something between 15 and 20% every month somewhere out, bowling, swimming, like any entertainment activities. And then we meet once in our office, and then we meet once again for like a international group and locals meeting where people get along. So it's like three activities per month that we lost for socializing. And because refugees, as Ibrahim said, we already faced those kind of things before the coronavirus, and the COVID-19. It's not a new thing for us, especially those who are still in the camps and still processing their cases. Now it's just intensified, and it's even a little bit worse. So it's very much problematic for having a social life. It's very much problematic for communication and so on. People are not having people to talk to, and it's practically not a social isolation, it's practically a total isolation. Yeah. We can't hear you.
We heard now a lot about trauma and maybe also the need for psychological counseling. And maybe a question to all of you: do you know about therapists focusing on these issues? Do LGBTIQ refugees have access to psychological counseling, or is it hard to get appointments or hard to find therapists specialized in these issues? Yeah, Ibrahim?
I would always refer back again to the language barriers. Even if there are enough and available therapists, then the language barriers comes as a big obstacle for them to express their trauma or to express their experience, because if you use a translation, even a sensitive translation in such situation, you will lose the feeling and the sensation which the people will express in such sessions. But what I would say now, for example, in this pandemic situation, we try our best, for example, to provide self-care online. For example, provide them, for example, with a daily schedule, what they have to do. We provide them with daily practices as well, what you include in your all day. At the same time, we provide them, for example, for self-assessment mood. It's online available. They can make the test, then they can see, okay, in which level their mood is. Beside to it, we can provide them with link for audio counseling, but unfortunately, this is all in English, so we are not able to reach, for example, Arabic speaking language, because the Arabic culture has a lack of such sensitive topic for counseling. So that was my personal experience now, and we developed a new thing in SOFRA Cologne. For example, I had contact with a lot of refugees, and they told me, oh, Ibrahim, what we can do, because we are not having the access again for this such safe places as SOFRA. And we decided, hopefully beginning of May, maybe we'll make on our online platform personal exchange experience between refugees themselves. For example, how you spend your day in the quarantine, how I'm spending, how are you facing your challenge, what challenges are you facing. So this broadcast will be like for 1 or 2 hours. The 2 refugees from different backgrounds will come from different places. They will come on the online platform of SOFRA and will exchange such experience. So itself is an empowering thing. Can say, okay, I can speak about my problem. I can listen to the problem of other people. We can support each other. So it's a part of also empowering victims of violence and people who are facing isolation in such pandemic time.
I can also add something about this point. As we always ask, and it back to the point, like this is intensified problems. We've been always asking for safer places. We've been always asking for better communication centers, with better counseling centers, better staff in the organizations, more and everything. So before the COVID-19, I suggested a project and it got accepted for the organization Plus. We were starting a task force of 10 refugees that they themselves could later on, and this by the end of this project, they can provide counseling and so on to reduce the pressure on the 2 or 3 persons that are offering counseling for the whole region that is like more than 3 cities and more than 10 camps and so on. But now it happened, we couldn't do the workshops and we could not do the training, so we're not really going to be up for the counseling, the proper counseling. However, we will still start the task force starting the end of this week, where we'll have 8 persons where we provide the data, the money for the data, and they will provide their time, not to offer any legal advice or something that we are not trained on and we lack the knowledge of. It's just like for some comforting and some communication, and it's like peer talkers and peer comforters, that we will keep it like that for now to ease the pressure on the people that are working officially like full-time in the organization. That way we have like, we divided like groups and regions, and people can have more than one only option to talk to and to communicate with, especially that the numbers are now almost all the time busy with the phone calls and with people calling and asking for meetings, and it's a bit more problematic because people are doing counseling via phone, so you can be on the phone busy for like 1 hour or something, so it's not very much reachable as well, the numbers. So we're, instead of 1 number or 2 number, now we will do like 9 or 10 numbers of volunteers.
I think the topic of what the self-empowerment and empowerment of LGBTIQ refugee organizations or LGBTIQ community organizations is really, really important, because in a time of crisis, we have to stick together, we have to work together. But I wanted to go back to a question, because we were talking all the time now about LGBTIQ refugees and the violence and trauma they are facing. I would maybe ask, especially you, Julia and Lilith, are there certain kinds of violence that, for example, lesbian refugees are have to deal with, that trans people have to deal with, and are there special needs for these communities under the umbrella of the LGBTIQ refugee community? Yes, please.
So the problem with lesbian refugees, or the problem with trans, especially, I would like to talk about the trans people. It's not new, and I must say that the trans refugees have been discriminated every time, also within the camps. And most of the trans people, they were always afraid of coming out as trans people. And if they came out, then they had other issues like dealing with the office, with the official authorities within the camps, because most of the time they are also not sure what to do. Like a person without any transitioning coming to Germany and telling them that I'm a trans person, which block of gender would they fit this person? And usually they would isolate the person, but that person still had the opportunity to come to different organizations like SOFRA, like LeTRa, like going to other like Plus. There are a lot of them who were always counseling trans people as well. But now that also is missing. So the person is now more isolated as before, and they are facing more traumatization, because this is what they were always doing also within their home country, like don't getting out, don't talking to the people. They won't show themselves as trans persons to the public, and wouldn't be able to live the life that they want to live. And the violence, as I said, I am now counseling a couple of people on telephone from South Asian region. They are all in a state of shock, because the COVID-19 pandemic is especially hitting them harder. It's something like they don't know where to go for the counseling, because some of them had already therapists, and they would go to these therapists also with a little bit aid of translators and interpreters. And those meetings were always arranged. So you need to have at least 3 people present to talk about the issues the person is facing at the moment. And then there were issues about taking hormones, and how to take those hormones, going to the doctor, getting your injections, things like that. It's all now somehow not clear what is going to happen. And this is, I'm talking about the refugees who have already got their asylum status. The one who are living within the refugee camps are facing more violence actually, and ridicule and harassment, because there is nobody else to go other than calling the social worker there. Yeah, hello, I am having problems. And even then you need an interpreter. Like the entire, how does an asylum center functions, most of the people don't even know about that. It is a system which makes you dependent on each and every authority person. You cannot evade that. And this is leading to more traumatization. Like now we have to contact every person and call and tell them about my problems. They are not feeling comfortable about it. And it's also a lot of emotional stress for so many people. So yeah, we are trying, like at least I'm trying with the people who speak my languages to comfort them, but it's not enough. I think the government need to look at the entire asylum system in Germany and see where are the real problems for all the vulnerable refugees, especially those who are pushed at the verge of the entire community. So somehow I think we need to come together after the COVID-19 pandemic is over. We must talk with the authorities in Germany, with BAMF, with the government, and find out real solutions that we have been telling them since years, and now it is more visible. This is what COVID-19 did with LGBTIQ refugees.
Julia?
Yeah, maybe I just can add on a little bit on the experience from our work with like lesbian queer women. So I would say, yeah, there is kind of a very specific violence against lesbian women. I mean, there is a lot of violence against cis women in camps. like women cannot often lock their rooms. There's violence of the security staff. There's violence of the cis male inhabitants in the camps. But then I can say from our work that there are a lot of cases where the violence against them as women is actually a very specific violence against them as lesbian women. So when like we had several cases where women were harassed, experienced sexual violence, and where the cis male perpetrators even like framed it like that they chose them, that they picked these women out because they heard that they are lesbian, or because they realized that they never date men or whatever. So this is something that our clients or the members of our organization were facing before the crisis. But as I said before, of course, like now they are locked with their perpetrators. So we had several cases where now with the Corona crisis, things really worsened, and there was like one single case where the government now reacted, but it like despite this general lockdown and despite all of the transfers were stopped, this woman was transferred to a safe women's place. But somehow this case on the other hand was also like really disappointing for us, because like the woman appealed, this specific woman appealed for transfer even before, and the harassment from this one specific male inhabitant was as an argument in her application for transfer before. So and the government actually rejected her transfer. So it seems a little bit that okay, the government was waiting until something really, really bad would happen until they would react. And then also in many other cases they wouldn't react. So yeah, so I would say there is the specific violence. And also, like, just to add on a little point, I mean, here maybe the term violence is too strong, but maybe just to also point out to the situation of mothers. I mean, amongst the lesbian cis women, which are under our counseling, there are so many mothers, mainly single mothers. And I guess the whole Corona situation is really difficult for all of the people who are responsible for children. But then just imagine you don't have a good Wi-Fi connection with which you can do the homework with your kids. You don't have a television, you don't have a big garden. So for all of these single mothers in the camps, especially the lesbian mothers, it's a really bad situation. We cannot hear you.
Muted.
I'm always shutting up off my mic so you don't hear the background noises. I have many questions for you, but we're slowly running out of time, and we also got many questions from the people listening to us, and I would like to open the discussion between you and our attendees. The first question would be, we talk now a lot about violence. How do you actually report violence if you experience it? What should you do? What would be the first steps? Are there guidelines how you should react when you experience a case like that?
I guess this question would be addressed to me. So reporting violence, because before we start reporting violence, a lot of LGBTIQ refugees, they don't have this mentality or this knowledge that I have to report such incidents, because they come from a background, they are used to such kind of violence. So our job is, before reporting violence, is prevention and awareness, to inform people about what is violence, what are the acts of violence, and provide our contact infos in case they experience such kind of violence, they can contact us. And we are clear at the beginning, in case they directly reach us, we cannot directly offer immediately support and help. At the beginning, in some cases, we can offer, for example, a safety plan, how to go out of a toxic relationship, or we can support, emotionally support. But mainly our work is to document, and also we support, for example, in cases, for example, by supporting at the police office, in the investigation process, in the process of the court, how should I make a claim online by the police? That is how mainly the work of reporting violence works, from awareness, prevention, reporting cases through the anti-violence office, and finally to supporting personal cases, maybe from police department or to courts.
Thank you. There were several questions going to the direction what has to be done on the level of the local governments, like state governments, but also federal government, and maybe also what should be the first steps that has to be taken after the end, in the beginning of the post-corona phase. And Lilith, you already mentioned that. Can we maybe again summarize what has crisis shown, where is a lack of structures, and what has to change now? What have we learned from the crisis, and what has to be changed in the system regarding LGBTIQ refugees? Maybe Julia, you can, and Rzouga, you can also add on that, and maybe also refugees in general.
So I would like to answer really precisely. Like we are already in contact with BAMF, and we are making reports about the issues that are faced by the refugees within refugee camps. So that's where the government is actually responsible in the beginning, the federal government, because BAMF is a federal department, and they take care of the people within the asylum centers. Although the problem is that all the asylum centers within Germany are a responsibility of the states. So you have to put in all the stakeholders and all the organizations, and we are going to get the organizations, the 90 organizations working for LGBTIQ refugees and asylum seekers together, and then put a big report post-corona. What were the real problems that we were always addressing, and how the COVID it is not safe for LGBTI refugees to be kept in camps for so long. We know that at the beginning of this year, there was a new law passed that most of the people within the refugee camps would have to live at least 18 to 24 months. So even after getting their, we have forgotten that many people, even after getting their asylum status, they have to live within the refugee camps and do not get out of that. And Bavaria, as Julia said, they were mostly stanch about it. No, we have to do it. And they were really adamant about it. No, people have to live in unconsented. This is totally wrong. The process should be not fast enough to just reject everybody and don't listen to people. It should be a stable process. The people should be given the adequate information. BAMF has already started that last year. They have a Asylverfahren Beratende, and they are supposed to provide all the vulnerable groups within the refugee camps information regarding their rights within Germany as asylum seekers and refugees. And we were very much closed in contact with all these people. And even now with the ministry, we are trying to eradicate the violence within the asylum centers. This is also one of the things that we are working on. So all these things were there. We were working about it. But somehow we all know, we are all from Germany, everything takes a lot of time in Germany. It doesn't matter how much you try and how much you put your efforts in, the government works really slowly. They won't work really fast, the way we want them to work. But I think after this, there are a lot of people within the ministries, within the governments, within the federal government, within the BAMF, who are our allies. And they want to change these things. And they want to do something about it. But they are not the authorities. They are just our allies. So working with those allies, with the authorities, that might bring a change. I'm not saying it will definitely bring a change, because we all know the system, how it works. It doesn't work in favor of those who are vulnerable. It works in favor of those who are privileged. That's how it works.
Julia, yes, please.
Yeah, so I mean, as we already talked before, I think Corona showed that these mass accommodation, these mass camps, that they are not suitable housing opportunities for most people. So I think these this whole camp system must be changed, anchor centers must be closed, and especially for LGBTIQ refugees, certain like possibilities to have a safe housing must be installed. This is, I think, after the corona crisis, it was clear before, but now after this it is even more clear. And then also that like in the camps, that something like wireless LAN is not actually a luxury, but it's actually it is something which can meet some basic needs of people. And then of course also like the access to work and education, which is at the moment really limited to just a certain group of people, either from a certain country of origin or people who have proven their identity, but like supporting yourself, learning the language, is of course also like part of a healing process, right? So if you don't have this feeling of being like so independent of state institutions, and yeah, I guess these are just a few. And then of course, like if people are able to support themselves and to read their letters themselves, it's also kind of a protection. It's part of an empowerment. It's also a protection of violence, because then people are not so long stuck even after the recognition in the camps. So yeah, just a few demands. There are many more.
I mean, very quick and short. It all leads down again to the government needs to do what the people have been asking forever now. I just arrived. Ibrahim have been here for years. Lilith have been here for years. Yulia have been here forever. People have been asking for this. Apply the law, provide the special need for the vulnerable groups in some state, and turn it into a national right, like not only federal state levels, but people should provide centers, should provide communication, we should be provided with the care that we need.
Mm-hmm.
People have been asking for this forever now.
I have one question. I don't know if you've experienced on this. It's on the situation of Muslim LGBTIQ asylum seekers in Europe, especially in Germany, with a focus on religion.
I mean, I can talk about this. Mm-hmm. It's currently Ramadan here now. Mm-hmm. But even for non-religious persons that grew up and in a Muslim country where Ramadan stepped more than being a religious act, rather a cultural gathering and a social opportunity. So for a lot of refugees, even the atheists out of the refugees, the agnostics, or for anyone who grew up with Ramadan, we take this opportunity together to feed our social needs, to feed our souls with not only food, but with because everyone tries to be kind in Ramadan, everyone tries to be fun, everyone tries to be cheered up. Now it's not possible for a lot of us to get this kind of gathering and this kind of opportunity. Some people got closer to God this area, this period. Some people got far from God. I mean, this should be its own panel and its own workshop, I believe so, because it is a thing. Yes, it plays a big role for people's beliefs and people interactions with their divinity or religion or so. Yeah, but it's more like now specific because it's now we are in Ramadan, mm-hmm. So it's slowly triggering some memories and some frustration, let's say.
Thank you. Ibrahim, also?
I don't have an input regarding Islam or the religion. I just want to need 1 minute at the end to present a new supportive platform for LGBT speaking people and English speaking people.
Okay. Yes, maybe because that would be maybe my last question, then you could maybe start. What we talk now a lot about how the government should react on at the federal level, on a state level. What has to be done from the LGBTIQ community regarding mental health, regarding fighting isolation. What kind of networks do we need? How do we stay in touch? How does the community have to react? Maybe very shortly from all of you, just a 1-minute statement to wrap up. Starting with Ibrahim.
First, at the beginning, I want to refer that this target, we are facing the same thing, because from the beginning, we work with isolated refugees in some villages or with no support structure. So always our aim was social media. But with this pandemic, it's focused the need of social media in such situation to reach isolated people. So that's why, for example, in this situation, we developed a lot of materials regarding safe sex practices for LGBT people, regarding hygiene practices for LGBT people in Corona time, information about Corona. And I want to refer today, after the seminar is over, published on this YouTube channel. We developed a YouTube channel called LGBT Arabs. It will be in English and Arabic with both subtitles, English and Arabic speaking channel. Will be published video about LGBTIQ refugees and COVID-19, so people can have like a summary of what main points what was discussed today. And at the same time, on this YouTube page, they will find how to report violence and how to contact us. And at the same time, later on this YouTube channel, will present a lot of materials regarding education, sexual health, and asylum system for LGBT Arabs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Julia, Lilith, Rzouga.
Okay, I can mention really quick that as a first step, we need to really remember not to leave anyone behind and to have our target groups like queer refugees and not people who are living with abusive partners, people who are living in the camps, people like really in the vulnerable situations immediately. We need to consider everyone. People can be living with their abusive selves. People can, loneliness is a theme now. So that could be very damaging for people to, I mean, for me, personally, now it would be a lot of effort for me to go out to the society all over again. It feels like now I'm going out of my country again and moving it all over and restarting all over. So it would be very much needed for people to provide how really to go back slowly to the social life and to the, we need to have the talk about things that everyone would talk about, not only the refugees, the reintegration, having the social skills all over again, and not just like focusing on the calls and the comforting and the documentation and all of that. We need to be more general with our work and not very much specific with defined groups and leaving people behind as an idea. Yeah, maybe Lilith or Julia can add.
Yes, Julia.
Yeah. I would maybe call out for more solidarity of the German-wide LGBT community. So I think this part of the community needs to acknowledge that there are so many BPOCs, that there are so many LGBTI refugees who are already part of this LGBTIQ community, but who are not enough represented in the big groups, associations, organizations, and as well as their needs, topics, and demands. So I guess I think, like from my perspective, there needs to be more focus on that, and yeah, I think I'm calling out for more solidarity.
Yes.
I would say just not solidarity and just not leaving anybody behind. We need to really look at the entire asylum seeking process from the scratch. This cannot be kept on like working like this the way it is working. And the people, especially those who are trans and those who identify as women and those who are non-binary persons, they should be included within the policy making process. And this is where the problem is. Most of the people within the government sectors and authorities where the policy making is done lack the right counseling and the right advice of the people who are refugees and asylum seekers and migrant backgrounds, who are mobilizing within these communities. So I think we need to listen more to the people and see what could be done better. I know asylum centers are not just going to go away next morning. It's gonna take time. And and that is like one thing, if the need of having asylum centers is that much urgent, then they should be really equipped with the things that people need in everyday life. People should be provided with Wi-Fi. People should have their spaces within the asylum centers, and people should be able to feel safe there and not feel unsafe the way they used to feel back in their home countries. And it doesn't matter which home country it was. LGBTIQ refugees are persecuted in all kind of countries, everywhere, even in Poland now. So traumatization has, I deal with all the, like, our project has become international somehow. I don't want to say that, but it is. We are getting a lot of questions from the Polish LGBTI community that we want to move to Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a better way? Can you help us finding jobs? Can you tell us how we can move here? So it is just our neighbor. Poland is not somewhere far away, Bangladesh. Because whenever we talk about asylum seekers or refugees or migrants, we always talk about Africa or Asia or people coming from third world countries. But no, there are also people who are being traumatized in the first world countries like Poland, in Hungary, and people are running for their lives. And this COVID situation has put them in such a bitter environment. It is such a bitter environment that you have, other than internet, which is a privilege, honestly speaking, it is not something that everybody has access to. Those people who do not have access to internet are left behind. They cannot access us. They do not know how to come to us. They do not know what to do. So we have to think about those people as well. And Germany being one of the leaders in the European Union, one of the countries that has a lot of potential and has a lot of say within the European Union, we can change a lot if we want. It is just the will that is sometimes missing, because we talk about a very small group of people. Maybe that's why. So I would like to end with that. Thank you.
Thank you for the beautiful closing statements. Thank you for sharing your insights, your knowledge with us all here in this second panel of our conference. I would now say that we shift to the lunch break. We have now 1 hour of lunch break. We start again at 1:30. We will continue this discussions with a panel focusing on community and health support. So practically, we are going directly now deeper into these issues we're already starting to address in our conversation, moderated by Harpreet Cholia, starting from 1:30 to 2:30. Please remember to click the new Zoom link for the third panel of the day. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for coming with us, asking us these many questions. We are trying now in the day, maybe also in the afternoon, the days after, to answer all your questions, especially regarding contact, emails, links to counseling institutions. And we hope to stay in touch with all of you. Thank you again for our wonderful panelists, and have a nice lunch break.